Hey guys, well, we are going to do something a little different today. Um, it's cold. I don't know if you can see out the window there, but we got, I don't know, 6 inches, 7 inches or so of snow the last couple days, and it is turning cold. Um, Next few nights are supposed to be anywhere from, I don't know, 8, 10 degrees Fahrenheit down to maybe as low as like -5 Fahrenheit. So it's only about 11 or 12 degrees right now today, and it's too cold to be outside. So I don't want to mess with my projects. So instead, I'm going to give you something a little different, and we are going to talk about um, some of the vehicles I've had over the years. And that means because I am slightly older, that means a lot of the first little batches can actually be on film because that's what we used back then. So I don't have a lot of those, so we'll go through those and we'll go through some digital images of some of my newer stuff. And I'm just going to give you a little taste of some of the vehicles I've had over the years because I think that might be fun. So come on, let's check it out. All right, guys. So here's the first one. This isn't me. This is my dad. This picture was probably taken it was taken in April of 1980. I was born in July of 1980, and I was actually the reason that this truck well, my next youngest sister and I, anyway, were the reasons why this truck went away. It was not exactly a good family vehicle, but this is where I got my love for vehicles and trucks from was my dad. So that's a '67 Chevy C10 with a 327, I believe, um, and a three on the tree. And he rebuilt that truck a couple of times actually, but it didn't like Michigan winters. And here's a couple, not trucks I own, but that's me somewhere around about 1987, and this is what I wanted for my birthday every year, was for my grandparents to take me to a truck stop. So, and we'd go through the parking lot and I'd get all the pictures I wanted of all the trucks. Sweet Freightliner cab over there, and what was a hot shot truck back in the day. Nowadays that would be a pickup, but a medium duty, probably about a 33,000 GVW medium duty, pulling a lighter trailer with, looks like, probably 12,000 pound axles back there. And then we got that one, probably a mid '80s Brigadier. It's a tall nose Brigadier, so it tells me that's probably a big cam in that truck, especially since it's running on 24/5 rubber. But a car carrier with a whole bunch of Mazda B series pickups. Looks like maybe a 323 Mazda and some 626s too. So kind of a time capsule there. And then this is, I'm not even in this one, but just a cool picture I found going through these old Superliner Mac with all Dayton's all the way around, tandem axle Jeep and a quad axle RGN pulling a big crane. Pretty sweet. So the first of my vehicles, I wanted a pickup truck when I was 13, 14 years old. My dad didn't want to spend the money on an old beater pickup, so he convinced me to get a van. So I paid $225 for this 1978 Chevy Beauville van. I painted it Chevy Marina blue, and you know, painted the wheels up, put beauty rings and center caps on it, and cut the back off. And I made a pickup truck. And I proceeded to bum around my parents' farm and generally wreak havoc in that thing. But I loved it. That damage is from 14-year-old Rob wanting to see what would happen when you drove into a tree at 30 miles an hour. So yeah, and that's the end of her days when we called the junkyard and had him come get her. This was my first road vehicle. One I obviously wish I still had to this day. That is a '71 Dodge D100 Swept-Line. The last year for the Swept-Line trucks. That truck came out of Colorado. I bought it in 1995, I believe, for $500, running on 7 cylinders, but it was rust-free. 318, 2-barrel, with a 4 on the floor, essentially a 3 on the floor, because first was a creeper granny gear that you didn't use, other than if you wanted to pull some stumps. And she topped out at 62 miles an hour, and I put a no fear sticker in the back window, and that was my high school truck when I turned 16. Not the most reliable truck in the world. The good news is on this, I do believe this truck is still alive and it's local. I worked for a farmer throwing hay for many years in my teens, and he bought it from me and is a big Mopar guy, and I believe it is still in his barn. He did a partial restoration and rebuilt the motor, and yeah, she lives. So this was the truck I replaced it with. My 1988 Chevy S10. Didn't we all have this truck if we were alive in those days? It was lowered. It had orange traction bars. It had Camaro wheels. It had an Iron Duke 4-cylinder and a 5-speed. You didn't get any more 90s cool than that truck. And I loved it dearly. Now we're going to jump into my the beginnings of my foray into my love for foreign cars, European cars. And this was how I accidentally fell into that. I just was looking for an inexpensive used car that got good mileage, and I found this 1987. It was either an 80. No, I'm sorry, that was an 89 Volkswagen Jetta GLI. So the GLI was kind of the performance version of the Jetta in those days, and this was an all original GLI. It had the original correct wheels. Had the 16 valve 1.8 liter dual overhead cam 4-cylinder. It was only putting out, I think, 115 or 120 horse, something like that. But in the late 80s, and in a car that weighed about 1,700 pounds, it was a pretty quick little vehicle, and I fell in love with them. And then along the same vein, this is a few years later, but this was the first new car I bought. This is my 2002 Jetta GLS. By this point in time, it was a 1.8 liter turbo 4-cylinder with a 6-speed manual. And, the Jetta had fattened up to about 2,400 pounds probably by then, but it was still a quick car at 180 horse, and I loved that thing. Backing up to my first medium duty, I had a little landscape company in college, and this was the the 1974 International Lodestar that I found way up north in northern Michigan, and my dad and I got it running and drove it back. That was long before I ever had trucks or trailers big enough to tow something like that. So I drove it with no heat in November, and we got it going. And I fixed it up and painted it and fixed all the mechanical issues and built side racks and made a landscaping truck out of it. I'm not a photographer, so I apologize for these blurry pictures, but that's what it looked like when I was using it. It was a specs on it was a 345 V8 with a 5-2 trans and air brakes. This was my my parents got really upset with me for this truck. So I graduated high school in 1998. I got about $1,700 for my graduation gifts from my graduation party, and I proceeded to go spend 50% of it on this truck. It was non-running. This was an 88 Chevy light 3/4 ton, so the 6-lug 3/4 ton that Chevy built back then, and it had 200 some odd thousand miles on it. Bottom end of the 350 was just about junk, and somebody had slapped new heads on it and finished off that bottom end by putting higher compression heads on. So I bought it for a few $100, $800 I think, and borrowed my dad's truck to tow it home, and proceeded to, in about 5 weeks time, I bought a different motor. I put the good heads on that slightly used motor. And by the way, that was back in the days when you found motors for sale in the classified ads in the newspaper. So, and then just generally fixed it up, spruced it up. That was a 5-speed truck, 4-wheel drive, got everything working, and I sold it for, I think, $1,800, and a little over doubled my money. And got a handshake and a pat on the back from my dad for that one, for not squandering my graduation money. Then moving on, this was my dad's truck. This was probably the weekend that he, because I've done some stuff to it in this picture. But regardless, this was his 89 Chevy pickup. It was a 305 with a 5-speed, regular cab 2-wheel drive, about as base of a truck as you could get. And he, other than if it had a V6, but basically the only option was the V8. He bought this truck. That's a 95 Chevy two-wheel drive, extended cab, 350 5-speed. So when he bought that, I got rid of my little blue S10 and I bought that 89 from him, and that was my baby for a long, long time. There's another shot of it doing landscape work. She was starting to rust by then, as you can see. There's a nice, I think that's my sister's little four-door Pontiac Sunbird in the background. That dates the picture a little bit. This is probably somewhere around 1999. A few years later, when I went to work for the company I'm a partner in now, they had an almost identical truck. It was a 1990 305 5-speed two-wheel drive Chevy. So I proceeded to buy that truck from the company for $1,400. I spent one weekend from Friday night through Sunday afternoon swapping over. And by that time, I had put had a 355 built and put that into the 89, and a whole bunch of fun little speed parts, Hurst shifters, and you name it. So I spent a weekend swapping all that over, and by Sunday afternoon, the rusted out 89 was for sale with a 305 back in it, and the 90 that was at the time anyway, rust free, was had the built 355 in it and was mine. So this is somewhere around 2003. I hadn't lowered the truck yet, and it was in primer. This is on vacation somewhere down in, I think, Tennessee. And this next few photos are what the truck looked like after I really had it dialed in. Put a GMC grill on it and blacked it out. Has the old 350 symbol from a 67 through 72. Of course, you can't not have that the red Chevy bow tie on the top of the windshield. Put fog lights in the air dam. Mirrors that I can't believe I put on. God, those are hideous. But this was a picture, I think, is from the same day. I bought this. I have a incredible soft spot for Mark III Volkswagen Jetta. So that's just a little base Mark III Jetta that I bought to bum around in and get 30 some miles to the gallon, as opposed to the built 355 with a 373 rear end in it. So that truck, by today's standards, it didn't get horrible mileage, but it didn't get great mileage. But those are my babies out in the hayfield behind my parents' house. A lot of great memories in that truck. We'll get to some digital images of it here in a bit, but that's the first camping trip my wife and I ever took together shortly after we met. That's up in the UP, Upper Peninsula of Michigan somewhere, and she's towing a 78 Starcraft pop-up. How life changes, and this was humble beginnings, let's put it that way. Last film picture I've got is this was my first work truck when I went to work for Barkman Landscaping. This is a 95 C3500 HD. Had the ever-loved 6.5 turbo diesel and a 5-speed NV 4500. And hated that motor, but I loved the truck. And obviously that 3500 HD's become a recurring theme with me, don't they? And back to my 90 Chevy. So this is in its final iteration. Lowered, has the Chevy Rallies, nice wide rally wheels on it. All painted up, all pretty. This is one that I never should have sold. There's the 355, all nice and neat. There's the interior with the Hurst shifter and switch panels and the big tack, sweet CD player. I love that truck. There's another Mark III Jetta. There's the white one there, hence my obsession. And yet another one in a long line of Mark III Jettas. I also have owned some Mark IIs. This is the one I put a ton of work into. So that's as I bought it, basically. Rebuilt most of the car, pulled the rear beam out, completely rebuilt it, pulled the old 1.8 out and painted the bay, installed a 2-liter out of a newer Mark III Jetta, partially rebuilt that, and swapped it in. That was obviously a 5-speed car, and wheeled it and cleaned it up and just did a little bit of everything to it over the period of about 2 years I had that car for, if I remember right. Obviously, when you're into European cars, you swap wheels a lot. You'll see that's a recurring theme.
This was my wife's first, well, actually it was her second Volkswagen, but we got her this once we had our oldest there, who was very young in that picture, but that's her 2003 Volkswagen Passat with a 1.8T and an automatic. A lot of good memories in that car. This is our first foray into the Volvo world. So this is her 2004 and a half Volvo S40, basically a European Ford Focus, but cool little car. And then soon after, we moved her up, a few years after anyway, moved her up into a 2011 Volvo S60. That was an amazing car. Wish we still had it. But anyway, my Volvo trip. Somewhere along the lines, I decided to buy this for about $400. That's a 68 Volvo 145 wagon. Um, Beautiful car. You can see, look at that interior. It's awesome. But once I cleaned it up, I found that the rust was a little more severe than I had hoped, and yeah, the front of the frame was gone. So we stripped it of anything that was of any value that I could sell, dozed it onto a trailer with a snowplow, and took it to the scrapyard. And yeah, this is those boys having some fun. I'm sure they loved crushing the crap out of that thing. So, and then this was a car that holds a lot of this, along with my 90 Chevy, was one that I missed. This is an '04 Volvo V70. Had a 5-cylinder turbo, 2.5 liter 5-cylinder turbo. I did a lot of work to this car, a lot of motor work, new turbo, bigger turbo on it. Obviously lowered it, tires and wheels as usual. Cleaned it up, did a bunch of headlight work. Just was a relatively low mile car that I pulled out of Pennsylvania, and we took this car all over the country, towing that little pop-up camper. Um, just just a really cool car. Really missed that. I actually just recently found it for sale on Facebook Marketplace locally. It's a lot worse for wear, but basically the same as I sold it. Had that car for about 5, 6 years, somewhere in there, and again, just a lot of good memories. Good, reliable, comfortable car. Just does what Volvos do. And then on to the 3500 HD. That's the only picture I've got when I bought it. I bought it for $900 with no reverse, and this was the first iteration of rebuilding it. So I sectioned and shortened the bed, rebuilt the transmission, cleaned it all up, painted it, and turned it into a plow truck, and made some good money with that truck over the years. This is the second iteration when I swapped the Cummins into it with the 6-speed, and it was still a plow salt truck. But this was after I had bought it back from. So I sold it when it was still white to a guy I worked for, and then bought it back and rebuilt it as a Cummins. And so these photos are when it was working. Worked hard for about 8 years as a plow salt truck. Drove it in the summer. Was a daily driver and a work truck in the summertime as well. And on the weekends, it towed the boat and took the family around. We'd cram 4 of us into that regular cab and go have fun. So this then was my final one before my F450. This was a 2011 F350 with a 6.7 turbo diesel in it, Power Stroke, and same thing. Tons of good memories in that truck. But word to the wise, don't buy a 2011 6.7. Because they do what 2011 6.7s do, and they have problems. So I did put 100,000 miles on it. It didn't show its face, and it didn't have engine problems until well over 200,000 miles. But did end up with basically a junk motor. So we got to do that, pull the cab and tear the motor down, and yeah, look at the carnage. Eventually did sell it, and then that brings us to the end of the video, guys. We're to present day, and you can watch all my videos if you want to see all the kind of the current stuff I've got going on. But overall, thank you for watching as always, and I hope y'all have a great week. Take care.